Alright, hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. This channel is focused on getting out there a lot of great obscure writings and philosophies and methods that you probably don't know about, but otherwise, if you did, they would help you benefit your life in manifold ways. Help you with your quest for better spiritual, mental, and physical health, your formation of a holistic worldview, your paradigm shifting, your awakening to 5D consciousness. And today is just our third video that we've done on the book called It's After the End of the World, Don't You Know That Yet? And this is about black jazz musicians in Chicago in the 1950s and 60s. We are going through chapter 1, which is on Sun Ra. I believe the chapter is called Calling Planet Earth. And we are about to start section 2, called Black Birmingham Family Life. Judging from his childhood, Sun Ra would surely qualify for the mission he set for himself. Even from his earliest days, the young boy Herman Sonny Blunt was precocious, perhaps because of his mother's unorthodox parenting beliefs. Sun Ra recollects, we went to visit some relatives in the country, and they was having a party. I was there. I reckon it was a party and they were drinking whiskey and other things, so I asked for some, so they gave me some. 3 years old, and I was so drunk I could hardly walk. They talked about me from then on, about doing that, and they talked about her, his mother. Well, that was the start of it. I was ostracized, you might say. His mother believed that if you get a boy drunk at a young age, he won't want any as an adult. And she was right in this case. Sun Ra's early life was a bit twisted, to quote the famous jazz vocal. But as an adult, he was a tireless preacher against the evils of alcohol. Sun Ra remembers it was at this early point when a greater force began to intercede in his life. A force Sun Ra usually referred to as the Creator, who took care of me as my friend and companion from then on. Sonny's father was not in the picture, except for a period when it seems that the family had to actively hide the boy so that his father would not kidnap him. His mother was in the restaurant business, and for protection, she kept him in the custody of his grandmother and great aunt in downtown Birmingham. School life alienated Sonny even more because it exposed his exceptional intellect. During the first 3 grades, John Schwed claims, quote, often while other children played games during recess in the field that served as a schoolyard, he read, and the teacher said that he soon had read everything in the school. Of a slightly later period, probably junior high, Sun Ra recalls, I studied all the English poets. I read Shakespeare. I studied Russian literature, but I didn't know what I was doing. I just liked to read. I read so much in the library. I read all the fiction, and I had to jump over into reading autobiographies and things. See, I make research. Teacher give me an assignment. I go there and read more books. I come back to class, I know more than the teacher. Indeed, by high school at the latest, the teacher frequently let Sonny teach the class. Quote, she put me up there teaching all the time. In high school, the teacher would put me up there. I had control of the class. Even though he was different from the rest, he was still well-liked, even sheltered. He looked back to note how he had no inkling of the ugly truths that would soon greet him. Quote, I was under protection because the same people that I went to school with in the 1st grade, I graduated with them in the 12th grade. I was with friends, that some force wanted me to be surrounded with friends, and I didn't know nothing about the world. I didn't know nothing. Back around age 10, Sonny joined a vitalist outdoor group called the American Woodmen. He later described it as a military organization, a group who learned the disciplines needed to live outdoors under adverse conditions. Seen only as a bookish type, he surprised his own family with his physical toughness. He was able to survive and thrive in this masculinized environment, a group that was both secretive and regimented, with symbols, initiations, and secret handshakes. According to Sun Ra, the group showed me discipline, all about secret orders and how to be a leader. Adding in his musical background, it seems likely that Sonny would eventually try to synthesize his musical skills and his understanding of secret organizations into a musical performance. Sun Ra's roots went back to the very beginning of recorded jazz. He, in fact, remembers his brother buying some of the oldest race records, and even earlier ones by white artists. As a child, living with his family, primarily his grandmother and great aunt, the neighbor's house fortuitously served as a rooming house for traveling black musicians from vaudeville shows. Everybody stayed there that was an entertainer. We was right next door, so then they always gave us passes, so we always went, you know. So I was acquainted with them, but I was just 7 and 8 and 9 years old. Sun Ra boasted that he met the black musical greats Bessie Smith, Clara Smith, and Ma Rainey, without knowing they were great, probably in the early 1920s. At the time, Ma Rainey was accompanied by a young pianist named Fletcher Henderson, just before he had worked out the orchestral swing concept. And this section is called Sonny and the Swing Era. First articulated vocally by singers like Bessie Smith and Ma Rainey, and then voiced instrumentally by Louis Armstrong, the swing concept created a counterpoint to the required repertoire of show business music. Henderson was later hired by white band leader Benny Goodman, and Goodman was hired by NBC to sell swing to nationwide audiences. During the Depression, orchestral swing, in a diluted form, became a nationwide craze with help from the institutional communication technologies. Sonny likely witnessed the swing concept in its original form, direct from its creators. He remembers being, quote, fed on Fletcher Henderson from the time in the cradle. And 1/4 century later, Henderson was the man to get Sonny established in Chicago. As a boy, Sonny attended the Baptist church with his grandmother, but eventually Sunday school got boring because he had learned all of the lessons. Quote, "It was a Baptist church. I left at an early age because I found it was monotonous to study the same thing in Sunday school the whole year. My mind was searching for something else. So finally, I just stopped going because I knew everything they were teaching. I had to research to find out things myself." Moreover, Sonny stopped going to church because, quote, "I never could understand if Jesus died to save people, why people have to die. That seemed ignorant to me. I couldn't equate that as a child." No doubt, while he was there, he was exposed to the ritually cathartic music of the Black Baptist tradition in Birmingham. The tradition encompassed rituals for healing and survival, where each musician served the group by expressing what he or she sensed was in the air. The musician played in order to detect these areas of tension among people and to bring them out in such a way as to sublimate, harmonize, or otherwise create a solution to that tension. These musicians use rituals to demonstrate creative solutions to societal problems. In the Birmingham gospel tradition, there was external discipline. There were strict rules on the musicians, but they had a sustainable logic designed to help the people survive. Baptist singers may have given Sun Ra perspective and discernment as a child, which helped him choose the vital parts of the music while avoiding the exaggerated fads of the commercialized jazz world. Sun Ra had an even greater feel for instrumental music. As he skipped down the street as a boy, he often felt like putting his feeling to music, but, quote, I could only hum. Showing incredible discipline for a child and a flair for the dramatic, Shwed claims that the boy, as a 10-year-old, surreptitiously studied from his sister's music book so that he learned how to play piano on his own. Then, on his 11th arrival day, when he received a piano as a gift, he promptly astounded everyone by already being able to play, and to play everything that they put in front of him. While Shwed's version of the events is certainly plausible, Sun Ra himself claims it was a more mysterious gift. Quote, they never could understand how I could do that. Neither do I. This was the first of several accounts of unexplained musical powers Sun Ra demonstrated throughout his visit to planet Earth. In either case, once he got the piano, Sonny went headfirst into learning more about music. Soon he was even writing his own compositions. This savant-like grasp of music remained in evidence throughout his long career. Associates have recalled that if Sonny heard a piece once, he could write out every part. While he was still in junior high school, Sun Ra was invited to play piano for the high school's adult band, led by Tess Whatley. It was a precocious yet humble beginning. Quote, they wanted somebody who could play in the band, march and that. I could sight read the marches, and when I was over there with the band, He remained with the band from about 1928 to 33. In the southern cities, the black middle class developed strategies to help the race build a foundation after the end of slavery. A plethora of social clubs functioned as both insurance agencies and social organizations. Members paid their dues and in return received sick benefits, had their funerals taken care of, and were allowed to participate in social affairs. These clubs hired marching bands who would sometimes march all day for events. Musical band leaders like Whatley spread a new black worldview based on a military work ethic, strict discipline, and the appropriation of white musical technology. Orchestras like Whatley's were key institutions that urban African Americans used to establish a middle-class respectability. To some extent, Sonny was already disciplined, but Whatley gave him a chance to learn about the psychology of running a big band. Working with Whatley's band gave him formative experience in the disciplined life of black orchestral music and gave him a chance to observe black aristocratic life in the South, both the talented 10th, educated, and the economic elite. Later in life, Sun Ra looked upon these years around the Birmingham black social club scene with nostalgia. Quote, each club would have something twice a year and invite the other clubs, and they'd be dressed, and that's the way I was raised up. I would play with them, and they'd be dressed. They'd have their stuff on. Each club would be trying to outdo the other in clothes, and they'd have something like fundraising. It was beautiful, and they had good bands. I mean, not bars and things like that. Each club would have something beautiful. I never played in any bars or nothing. I just played for them, a nice aristocratic social. Sonny emphasized that for the first part of his life in Birmingham, he experienced no overt racism. It was not until after he toured with the band that he began to understand the white worldview regarding music. Okay, this section is called Sonny's Early Professional Experiences. Organization of music via representation describes the personification of orchestral music in one individual spokesman in order to convince people that things must be organized hierarchically. Representation was necessary for the institutional exchange that creates concentration of financial power. The orchestra musician thereby became a professional, a mere instrument of the powerful, paid to perform and amplify pre-arranged music. In the classical period, music and representation ushered in the age of the ascended bourgeoisie. It emphasized the harmony and served to hide the dissension and conflict in the world they lived in. With such beliefs, the bourgeoisie could focus on cultivating their aesthetic tastes while ignoring and forgetting about the general violence. Therefore, over time, orchestral representations, later arrangements, built a mindset into the audience, a staged reality that censored the views of the excluded. Ironically, bands like Fess Whatley's helped blacks establish a commercial power base of their own middle and upper classes as a defense against the white power structure. In later years, walking downtown, Sonny also began to get a sense of the white world of repetitive programming through media recording technology. In Western music, media recording was originally a support for representation, but eventually recording became dominant. The media used communication technology, talking machines, as a surrogate for live music so that it could be heard again and again through mass production technology until the music lost its original meaning and the music acquired a new meaning handpicked by the media institution. These entities would search for common denominators in the music that would appeal to the desires of large amounts of people. Like many of his northern counterparts, Sonny began to get involved with these mysterious technologies of the powerful institutions, arranging a noon daily broadcast for the Ripple Tobacco Company that played throughout the South. The concept of endorsing is old to us now, but during the 1930s, it was burgeoning in part because as rural people moved to the cities and or got exposed to radio, they longed for advice about how to fit in, especially regarding the proliferating variety of consumer items, like tobacco, that constituted the new democracy of goods. Companies would use radio advertising as a veil for lecturing to audiences about acceptable behavior. Radio was like the conscience in that it was a voice piped into the farms, homes, and urban flats of Americans and was able to establish itself quickly as an intermediary with listeners. Modernizing Americans had too many decisions about what to consume, so they relied on advertisers for guidance. The powerful companies kept putting new varieties on the shelves over time, pushing the decision from should I buy something to what should I buy, turning luxury items into necessities. Through subtle techniques, advertisers set up consumption communities, especially on radio, where listeners were instructed to consume through the symbolic meanings given to individual products. In advertising, music's function was to set the buying mood, and in this way, musicians were utilized as subliminal agents of the advertisers, who were themselves agents of the nationwide corporations. Advertisers had a symbolic or symbiotic relationship with black musicians, as both were trying to establish themselves as professionals in the early decades of the 20th century. Work for orchestral endorsing was coveted by black musicians in the swing era. For Ripple Tobacco, Sonny took great interest in his work. He arranged the music and taught it to the musicians by ear. Much later, he looked at these arrangements with fondness as the true way jazz is played, not indicating whether selling tobacco, a substance he later strongly disapproved of, gave him an ambivalent conscience. Okay, this section is called The Foundation for Conscientious Objection. While playing in the teacher's band, Sonny also had a younger group of musicians with whom he practiced, but he was a reluctant leader despite his obvious abilities. It was apparent to others, however, that he had the ability to lead. He became a band leader at about 18, and soon thereafter he would claim that he had the best band in Birmingham. Supporting this claim, he later explained that his band was the best because he was the only one in Alabama who knew self-arranging, a skill he learned years earlier. He remembered, quote, "I learned about arranging and everything subconsciously. I didn't know I could do it until one day a trumpet player wanted me to arrange something and I told him I couldn't. I didn't know nothing about transposing or nothing like that. He said, 'You can do it.' So, being innocent, I did it." All the other bands played stock arrangements from the publisher. In order to play in arrangement for commercial audiences, the music had to be organized and everybody had to play their premeditated part. Sonny's arrangements were looser than other band leaders because they were unique and original, not copies bought from the publishing company. They were written to take advantage of the individual strengths of the musicians in his band. From the early days, though, he felt ambivalent about music, status, leadership, and show business. Quote, "I knew that musicians had a hard time and they had a hard way to go. The American church was saying jazz was the devil's music. I didn't want to get involved." Jazz had a reputation as the devil's music because of the consensus worldview regarding black music in America. Black music had been used as bait to try to sell something else. In the saloon, in the snake oil medicine show, the vaudeville tent show, in advertising, and in the New Orleans whorehouse. Black music was associated with prostitution, drinking, and gambling. Sonny began to feel that the higher purposes of black music had served in the past needed to be brought into public view. Once Sonny began to sense the responsibilities of leading his own band, he realized that there were several problems with stock arrangements and media recording technologies. At some point, he retreated, gave up his band, and decided to go to college. "I got a scholarship," quote, "I got a scholarship. I did that to get rid of music." He enrolled in teachers training courses at Alabama A&M University in Huntsville, which is eventually where I believe there's a NASA headquarters there now, or certainly not at that time, but that's kind of interesting. He chose teachers training because of the breadth it offered. College, as a replacement for music, served as an act of conscientious objection to the powerful institutions, both white and black. Destiny, however, interfered with Sun Ra's plans. The day after he arrived in Huntsville, his entire band showed up too. They had followed him there, and they somehow convinced the school president to give them all work scholarships, with the stipulation that they had to practice music 1 hour per day. It's possible that the band members had recommendations from Fess Whatley, whose word was enough for a scholarship at many Southern black schools. Black college bands were a major source of fundraising for the school, and for Sonny, this may have salted the wound of having to take his band back. It was most likely at this time in the early 1930s that his band began to arrange music in representation for fundraisers in front of white audiences. This section is called Sonny's Historical Inversions. By this point, it is clear that Sonny's story is historically significant, but this is still the history verified by Schwed's objective account. It is by applying Sun Ra's strategy of inversion that the story really begins to astonish. For example, according to his space mythology, the watertight Jim Crow segregation of Birmingham and its environs had some holes in it. In his youth, quote, Fletcher Henderson came to Birmingham one time with a white musician in his band. He'd been down in Gaston, Alabama, before coming to Birmingham, and they said this white musician can't play in the band unless he blackened his face. That happened then in Gaston. Then, so he came to Birmingham, and everybody wondering what he was going to do in Birmingham. So then they say, well, this white musician couldn't play. Well, the steel workers, black men and other black men came there and said, we work with white people every day. How come musicians can't play together? Birmingham, as Robin Kelly and others have shown, had an interracial solidarity forged in the 20s and 30s when the Communist Party came there to recruit African Americans, which could account for the tolerant attitude. Sun Ra's mythology carries the inversion of Jim Crow further, outside the city and into the country. I went to Scottsboro for a white ballet company and played for them right when they was having the trial of the Scottsboro Boys, 1931. He said, I went there and played with the white band. I played with the army band. They didn't say nothing. Sun Ra's skin color was far too dark to pass as a white among Anglos. Was Jim Crow not as tight as we thought, or was there some alien power at work? His tales inverting Alabama's racism extend into a much later period as well. Quote, Governor Wallace was in office. He sent for me to come to his mansion. So he put me in a place, a hillbilly redneck motorcycle gang Nazi KKK place that was rough, and they had 5 pool tables in the back. Now he put me in this place on the edge of a black neighborhood. It was standing room only, and they said, love is all around you in Alabama. Then they shouted my name for 15 minutes, shouted, rah, rah, rah. I had to get out of there and go to the bus. Yes, the KKK and the rednecks too. Sun Ra's inverted stories went north too. In Carnegie Hall and New York, the hillbillies was following me. 2 busloads jumped out and walked behind me in New York City around Carnegie Hall. When they heard me, they said that America wasn't treating me right, the greatest music America had, and they came up there in their buses from the South, and they came to hear us, and they had their tickets for every event. For at least a year in the mid-1930s, his A&M College band continued to perform. They made at least 1 tour of the South and 1 tour that went as far north as Chicago, where he joined the Black Musicians Union as Sonny Lee. In his diary, he wrote of being surprised with his unmitigated success with northern white audiences. He said he'd hoped to be a failure so he could quit show business for good. At this point, Sonny's ambivalence reached the breaking point. In his diary, he wrote that he was abducted by beings from a different planet, which he presumed was Saturn. The beings escorted him through a process of transmolecularization via an energy corridor to Jupiter, his planet of origin, where he was told to quit school and the band and to stop tying music up with money, politics, and show business, and to study it as a science for its own sake. For Sonny, the abduction marked the, quote, end of the world, and caused him to devote the rest of his life to the beginning of a new world. When he was abducted in his early 20s, he had an esteemed background to prepare himself for his new mission. Okay, that is the end of section 6. Section 7 is called Cosmic Myth. And we'll start that tomorrow when we return. Thank you for tuning in today, and have a